Ancient Egypt, known for its riches, the pharaoh kings, the pyramids, and its hieroglyphs, is one of the greatest civilizations to have ever existed. For about 3,000 years, since its first unification in 3100 BC to its final conquest by Alexander the Great in 332 BC, Egypt was the central civilization in the ancient world. If you're new here, I'm Darius and this is Vlogs of Knowledge. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because we do have brand new episodes every single Wednesday. And today, we're talking about the Egyptian civilization. The first and most important thing to know about this civilization is the fact that it lasted well over 3,000 years. And that's not even counting the somewhere around 2,000 years of Egyptian civilization that predates history itself. And what I mean by that is that what we call history is limited to the written documents that we have discovered. Anything before writing is technically considered prehistory. The Egyptians were there before and after writing. In fact, they were one of the first ones to discover writing in the first place, which goes to show just how big of a civilization they were. 30 centuries, that's a lot of history to talk about. And if you don't believe me, well, let's look at some stats. In 30 centuries, we have 9 distinct periods, 3 kingdoms, 13 different capitals, 30 dynasties, and about 170 different pharaohs. Each period has its own distinct characteristics, and each kingdom has its different rulers, whom, by the way, all thought it would be a cool idea to keep switching the capital around. Safe to say that ancient Egypt is one big mess. But don't you worry, I'm very good at taking messy things and making them simple and easy to understand. Let's start with location. Egypt is located on the African continent just south of the Mediterranean Sea. It's very close to modern-day Israel, Syria, and Iraq. If you were to look around there in the year 3000 BC, you'd most likely see sand in any direction. Egypt is in the Sahara Desert, which makes you wonder how they were able to build such a massive civilization on sand. Sand and the desert would have been a big problem had it not been for the Nile River. The Nile River, most commonly referred to as the Nile, is a massive north-flowing river that spans about 6,800 kilometers and opens up to the Mediterranean Sea. It's so big that you can even see it from space. The river transformed the otherwise hot desert into fertile land, which allowed the early Egyptians to build their first settlements. Every year, the river floods in a predictable manner, which allowed the people to synchronize their agriculture with the tides of the water. Add on to that the strong irrigation systems that people built for the river specifically, and you have everything you need to build a civilization. By about 5500 BC, small tribes living in the Nile Valley had developed into a series of cultures, showing a good understanding of agriculture and animal domestication. Because when you find a water oasis in a desert, you can expect the local animals to have found it too, and that's what we call the pre-dynastic period. In that period, belief in the gods defined the then Egyptian culture. An early Egyptian creation myth tells the story of the god Atum, who stood in the midst of chaos before the beginning of time and spoke creation into existence. Atum was followed by the eternal force of Heka, which stands for magic, and was personified in the god Heka. Heka is the main force which fueled the universe and caused all things to function as they did. It also gave birth to the central value of the Egyptian culture, Mahat, which means harmony and balance. All of the gods and all of their responsibilities went back to Mahat. The sun rose and set as it did, and the moon moved across the sky according with the balance and order of Heka and Mahat. The entirety of Egyptian life revolved around keeping the Mahat, the balance and harmony of society. The written history begins at some point between the year 3400 and 3200 BC when hieroglyphic script is developed. The Egyptians began writing things down, and just as what was happening in other cultures worldwide at the same time, those small communities along the Nile became centralized and grew into larger urban centers. Civilization had now begun. That's when we entered the first historical period of Egypt, the early dynastic period. Having grouped into bigger urban cities and districts, the territory was then divided between the north and the south, Lower and Upper Egypt. A mysterious king by the name of Menes is then said to have unified the two lands and declared himself king and ruler of all. However, this story is debated because we don't actually have any record of any Menes that lived during that time. But some historians argue that Menes may have been a name used to refer to any king, since Menes is an honorific title that translates to he who endures. Nonetheless, this period marked the very first dynasty and the establishment of the first Egyptian capital, Memphis. Now, a dynasty, for those that don't know, is simply a lineage of kings, rulers if you will, that trickle down, usually from father to son, in the same bloodline. As soon as the bloodline breaks and you have somebody else who becomes a king from a different bloodline, you can think of a different dynasty. Trade increased significantly under the rulers of the early dynastic period, and elaborate mastabatuns, early versions of what was to become pyramids, began to be developed in ritual burial practices. And with these rituals, we also got the start of mummification, where the Egyptian kings would be mummified to preserve their bodies. Egypt had a long-standing tradition of burying their kings and preserving their bodies. It was believed that a king, after his death, would become the god Osiris and roam the supernatural world. And to help the king do that, his physical body had to be preserved as best as possible. Then comes a period by the name of the Old Kingdom. During that period, architecture developed at an increased rate, and some of the most famous monuments in Egypt, such as the pyramids and the Great Sphinx of Giza, were constructed. The immense size of these structures and pyramids, built with beautiful shining white limestone, served as a message to the ancient world regarding the power and wealth of the Egyptian rulers during this period. They were able to build these massive structures largely due to the ridiculous amounts of gold that they possessed. Their gold came either from mines or from foreign conquest. Egypt was one of the very first civilizations, and that certainly has its advantages. You're able to better organize your army, conquer different territories, and steal their riches. Plus, I guess it really helps we're in the middle of a desert, and getting to you can be quite impossible for enemies. I mean, you're very safe in the desert. Now, contrary to popular belief, there is no evidence that any structure or pyramid in Egypt was built by slave labor. Although slave labor was common in that era, these structures were considered public works and used paid labor to build them. Workers at the Giza site, which was only one of many, were given a ration of beer 3 times a day. Their housing, tools, and level of health were all taken care of. Now, as I always say on this show, nothing lasts forever. What follows is a brief period of instability known as the First Intermediate Period, where the kingdom split into two temporarily because of independent districts breaking off and forming their own governments. The dynasty was also split into two, and the capital moved to Hierakonpolis. All districts were fighting for supreme control of the land until the Theban king Mentuhotep II defeated the forces of Hierakonpolis and united Egypt under the rule of his city Thebes, which then became the new Egyptian capital. Poor Egyptians, so many capitals, so little time. Of course, I'm skipping over a lot of stuff to keep it simple and organized, but already you can see the chaos and turmoil that these people had to go through. I mean, 13 capitals in the Egyptian civilization, that's a lot. The stability of Mentuhotep's rule is what ushered the next period in Egyptian history, the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom is considered Egypt's classical age when art and culture really developed, and Thebes became the most important and wealthiest city in the land. That's when the first standing army was created, the Temple of Karnak was begun, and some of the greatest art and literature of the civilization was produced. Unfortunately, this was right about the time when the rest of the ancient world was also catching up, and Egypt was finally faced with its first serious foreign enemy, the Hyksos. This era is known as the Second Intermediate Period. While the Hyksos, whose name simply means foreign rulers, were despised by the Egyptians, they did introduce many improvements to the culture, such as the composite bow, the horse, and the chariot, which greatly helped the Egyptians advance. Once again, you have another king, conquers Egypt, starts a new dynasty, restores both Upper and Lower Egypt under one capital. At least this time it's still Thebes, and this is what started the next period, the New Kingdom, which is arguably ancient Egypt's most well-known and most prosperous period. There was once more a strong central government, the title of pharaoh was created, the Valley of the Kings was built as a substitute for king burial in the pyramids, Egypt expanded its borders, and Ramses II became the longest ruling pharaoh at the age of 90. In fact, Ramses II is a very funny character. He lived double the life of the average Egyptian commoner, which if you think about it, means that some Egyptians only knew one emperor throughout their entire life. Because he outlived everybody twice, and when he died, some people legitimately thought that the end of the world was coming, which I mean, I guess I understand, because if you only know one pharaoh throughout your entire life and you associate him with being divine, when he dies, you kind of think that the end of the world is coming. I don't know, I thought it was funny. What follows is unfortunately the decline of the Egyptian civilization. The wealth and riches of the pharaohs had attracted foreign powers who were finally able to venture into the dry desert to attack the Egyptians. One of the reasons that the Egyptians were able to last for so long was the very fact that it was a huge challenge to cross the desert with a massive army. Plus, you had some divisions within the Egyptian religion, the central government, and even the different districts. And as is often the case, when a kingdom starts fighting with itself, it's only a matter of time before it starts to fall apart. The fall of Egypt began with the Persians, who conquered it in the 6th century BC, then came Alexander the Great, who took it from the Persians in the 4th century BC, and finally the Romans, who officially conquered it and made it a Roman province in the year 30 BC. But really, after the period of the New Kingdom, Egypt was no longer the same prosperous nation it once was. And now I want to pass the question on to you guys. What do you think about Egypt as a civilization, about its history? Do you find it interesting? Please do leave me a comment. I would love to read and answer them all. And bonus points for you, if you do leave a comment, you might get featured in next week's video as a fan of the week. As usual, I know I haven't talked about everything regarding the Egyptian civilization. That's okay. I actually do this on purpose because I want you guys to go out and research more on your own. Because I believe in research, and I believe in creating this show to get people educated, but also curious about a subject, to want to research more on their own. And if you guys want to do that, as always, you'll find links in the description where you can start. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here, giving your time to this video. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave it a big thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, join Team Knowledge, and be notified whenever I release a new video. And with that being said, my name has been Darius. It's been an absolute pleasure. You can follow me on social media. The links will be in the description, and I will see you all next Wednesday.